Tales from the crypt, tales from the dark side, tales of the unexpected. Horror and mystery anthologies are no strangers to both television and film, but for the most part, very underrepresented in the realm of video games. Which brings us to Dark Tales from the Lost Soul, a Japanese-only PS1 title, which I think in earnest tries to capture the very essence of, well, a horror anthology series. So let's go ahead and get started with our first story, Cat and Mouse.
ご来場の皆様、ザ・ロストソウルにお越しいただき、誠にありがとうございます。私が案内役のテラーでございます。以後、お見知りおきを。さて、お待ちかねの余興が今宵も始まります。ご来場の皆様には大切な思い出の品を一つお持ちいただいていると思いますが、おや、グローブですか。いいですね、スポーツは。でもやりすぎはいけませんね。ボールに血がにじんでますよ。そちらのご婦人は鳥かごですか。曲線が美しいですね。しかし肝心の小鳥はどうしたんですか。かわいい人形ですね。ピエロですか。ピエロといえば私、面白い話を知っています。殺人鬼を追い詰める刑事さんの話なんですがね。失礼。最初の余興はこの話にしましょう。ミュージック。舞台は夜の遊園地。おいつ、おわれつ、キャット&マウス。お楽しみください。どこに行きやがったんだ。やろう。
And before we are even able to really get our bearings about the story, who we are, where we are, why we're fighting a disembodied clown mask, and shoves us into what appears to be a first-person shooting section. But in reality, that is a little bit misleading because, well, this is not an on-rail shooter akin to a Virtua Cop or Lethal Enforcers. Instead, Dark Tales from the Lost Soul plays akin more to, I think, what the Japanese would call a sound novel, or I guess it could be considered a choose-your-own-adventure type of game. Such as in this case, we are going to need to follow that clown mask into Shadeland. Means we are going to have to figure out what would be the best course of action here. We could just use our gun to blow off the lock, but it might be possibly a better idea to call for backup and maybe try to corner this deadly killer inside the amusement park. Now, as we are one day from retirement, I think we should play it safe, make that call.
Oh, 俺だ! 大至急応援頼む. ここはなんだよ. 肝心な時に通じやしねえ.
So immediately we are presented with a number of commonplace media tropes, such as the last day to retirement, never a good sign, broken lines of communication, this constant normal horror trope, being locked inside what seems to be a pretty obvious trap. Still, for our hard-boiled, hard-nosed detective here on his final day before retirement, he doesn't have time to worry about any of that. He needs to catch up with that horrible killer, I think who the newspaper is designated as Evil Eve. And just what shall we hope to be in store for us within the mysteriously named Shadeland? Well, a part of me, with my knowledge of drag race culture, I assume we'll be having to deal with a lot of insults and having to deal with a whole lot of tea in here. But more than likely, though, I think the idea of a shade in this sense is more, I guess, a ghastly specter that we might find in the afterlife, or that might lead Dante through the inferno of hell. In point of fact, it is a bit disquieting just how quiet and dark the amusement park is. It also doesn't help all of these different, I suppose, I don't know if they're supposed to be Harlequin or merely clown mask adorning all the lamp poles here. Definitely seems, though, that we are going to have to stay on our toes. Because Evil Eve is not only a very deadly serial killer, but also possibly a supernatural one. It's a bit hard to tell what the game tries to communicate with the disembodied clown mask and the floating sickle. It could be that Eve is just masked by the darkness, or it actually is some ghostly otherworld force. It also seems fairly obvious at this point that Eve is not just wanting to straight out kill us. It seems she's wanting to play a deadly game of cat and mouse. Now we are presented with another decision here. We don't really know which way Eve could have gone, so it's really up to just blind luck if one way or the other is the right way. So let's try the to the left. Now, outside of the more simple, yes or no, left or right decisions that we might be presented with, you might have noticed while we had our first little scuffle there with Eve, or when we almost got stabbed in the face by that spike, that there were, 4 green arrows at the cardinal directions, and that's because this game is, well, I'll say this chapter at least, is pretty much filled to the brim with QTEs like that, and they are all very deadly and dangerous to deal with. Now, what's not dangerous or deadly to deal with? Why, it's a nice and lovely Ferris wheel. Or night wheel. And we are given what seems to be another fairly innocuous decision to make. Do we go with the red or the white mask? Now, as I am in a happy mood, I don't want to go with that sad red mask. Let's go ahead and check the white.
?12 月23日、1955年。明日パパとママと一緒に遊園地に行くことになったの。いつも忙しいパパが今日突然言い出した。ママはあんまり嬉しそうじゃなかったけど、でも私は幸せ。明日は絶対ティーカップに乗るんだ。なんだよこりゃ。お、止まったぞ。いた！やろう！
So we found a fairly charred letter, I suppose, diary entry on that Ferris wheel back there, and it just so happened that the date on that matched up almost exactly with the time and date on the charred ticket that we found for the night wheel that led us there in the first place. Before we ponder too much on that, we have another quick decision here. Suppose we could go and head to the telephone to try to phone for backup, but I feel like that might just be another trap set up by Evil Eve, so instead, let's check out and see what Clown Kid is. Now, for the most part, all these different decisions can easily lead further on in the story get you even more backstory as to what is going on, such as, well, we would not have been able to find that note on the Ferris wheel if we did check the red mask instead of the white. And, well, I will say some decisions are just bad decisions all around and will just lead to your death. And this game is absolutely filled to the brim with possible ways to die. Case in point, the extremely dangerous attraction Clown Kid. And not only do we have to deal with the QTEs of dodging this dangerous gun-wielding clown, but it is very important that whenever you see that crosshair come up, and it does go across the Clown Kid, you have to make sure and press that fire button, otherwise you are going to have to go through another cycle of QTEs. For taking down the clown, though, we do get that strange key in the music box. Pretty much as we are just blindly chasing around this disembodied Harlequin mask through the amusement park, we pretty much need any type of items that we might be able to find. I mean, right now we're just kind of vaguely going pretty much wherever this clown is directing us. I mean, from that young girl's letter, she mentioned being very excited to ride the teacups. Wouldn't you know it, there's another scrap of information here for us. It seems that on Christmas Eve, old Nightwill managed to catch a whole lot of fire and burn down. I guess knowing now that the Nightwill burned down on Christmas Eve, and well, we did find that charred ticket from, I guess, one day prior, and also that charred diary entry from one day prior. Seems that, I guess, that young girl possibly managed to meet a fiery fate on that fated night on the Nightwheel.
Yarrow.
Seems pretty obvious that the game is really trying to point us in the thought process that this evil Eve may have been that young girl on the Nightwheel. It looks like we found our next location that we need to head towards, but first,
動き出したぞ。
Means we do have another avenue for getting a little bit more information. Now, this seems like a simple 50-50, easy decision to make. Red or blue, right or wrong, doesn't seem to matter, but I don't really want to be pulled into these guessing games every time, so I'm just not going to make a decision. For the most part, though, indecision is never the right answer in this game. In fact, I think anytime you don't actively make a decision, something bad will usually happen to you. So, I guess we're just gonna, we'll go with blue. Now, all it seems to end up telling us is something we already found, which is that there's a note on the night wheel. Which I guess is fine. I think we already got enough general information from the night wheel to go on for right now.
Tempest.
Oh man, if there's one thing that Silent Hill 3 taught me, if anything, stay away from rickety, disused roller coasters in any horror game. Sadly, our hard-nosed detective kind of falls into yet another very commonplace trope in, I think, a number of different forms of fiction, which is he is very narrow-minded, has a bunch of tunnel vision. He is just focused on one entire goal, and he seems to actively ignore his safety and well-being, if only to get to the end of the case, to stop the killer, etc., etc. And, if you take, for instance, like the Saw films, or I think there's probably characters in Manhunter / Silence of the Lambs, that entire series, it never really works out for the narrow-minded detective or federal agent. They usually, in their narrow hunt for justice, they usually end up falling into some deadly trap, and they don't really end up catching the killer. Still, we did manage to get the upper hand on Evil Eve in that pretty dangerous roller coaster fight scene there. And while we don't find her body down here, it does seem that we have finally wounded her to some degree, and I do finally get the impression that she might just be a flesh and blood human being and not some supernatural murderous force. Still, even though I think we did wound her, still feels like we're heading into a dangerous belly of the beast.
待ってろよ。
We're merely just puppets being pulled on a string here.
ドアか。妙な銅像だな。
Now, while it might seem that checking these statues could be just another obvious trap, I kind of do want to check them out before I keep heading forward. In this case, it does pay off for us because it does unlock the door.
じゃあこっちは。
And for the adjacent statue,
オルゴール。鍵がかかってる。
well, we do find a locked music box, but coincidentally, we did happen upon that key from the clown kid.
やっぱりそうか。手紙？読みにくいな。私は悪魔に見初められた男。命と引き換えに求婚を迫られ、私は残虐な殺人鬼を妻にめとった。その歪んだ夫婦愛によって授かった愛しい娘。私は娘に愛情を注ぐことによって偽りの家庭を築き上げてきた。しかし最近娘の目を見るたびに妻と同じ狂気に満ちた瞳が映し出される。もうこれ以上自分をごまかせない。神よお許しを。以上。
It seems more and more pieces are starting to fall into place.
テーブルと
A shattered family, a murderous wife, a child carrying on those homicidal genes. And it seems that the father, I think, he inevitably probably took things into his own hands, and he was the one that lit the fire on the night wheel. Before we deal with any of that, we do need to solve a little bit of a puzzle here. By checking the table there, we are greeted with a series of particular playing cards following the clown face motif of the amusement park at large. And the reason we wanted to make sure and check that table before heading through the door is because it's part of a larger puzzle to get through the labyrinth. We are presented with a series of, I think, 5 doors, or 5 sets of doors. And if you manage to choose even one wrong door, well, that's a game over. Still, it's not too difficult to remember, I think, 5 sets of images. And to some degree, you do have a 50-50 chance of making your way through those decisions. And for that, we finally make our way to what I assume is the center of the labyrinth, and what I can only assume to be the main lair of Evil Eve.
獣が。
It appears, though, that we've encroached into a place we definitely do not belong, and while it seemed like Evil Eve was wanting to just merely play games with us before, she is now very deadly serious about getting rid of us, so hopefully you did make sure to remember the order of those doors you just went through, because you are going to have to make your way correctly back through them in the opposite order. Yet again, not terribly difficult if you do have even a partially good memory. For some reason, though, instead of ending up back in the passageway we came from, we find ourselves in a much more deadly place. I can only assume this passageway of spikes and masks was not in the original design of Shadeland. And boy howdy, hopefully you have razor sharp reflexes, because this part is not only very fast, but it is also very long and has very few checkpoints. Now, I will say, the game is pretty lenient in the realm of giving you continues. You pretty much have infinite lives, but there is a very good reason why you do not want to die too many times in a particular chapter. Also, I fully admit, there's probably a lot of editing going on in this that pretty much required me to do this section multiple times, multiple save states. I don't know how you're supposed to get through this with just, normal reaction times. It's super difficult. Point of fact, this is actually the first checkpoint in this entire section. Also, you might think, hey, I should probably use my gun. But if you recall, we don't have that gun anymore. So if you did make the wrong decision and try to just shoot at Evil Eve there, it would be a game over. Instead, our resourceful detective is going to set up a little bit of a trap for Evil Eve that I would say probably has some poetic justice to it. We can't really linger for that for too long, because this section of the passageway comes with one additional, little hiccup, in that for the most part, in that first section we only had to deal with left, right, down. And there are a little bit of hints here and there to kind of give you an idea about which way you need to go, because if there are masks on two sides, you need to go down. If there's a mask on a left side, go to your right. If there's a mask on your right, go left. But for this section, it also opens up the little trap doors underneath you. So whenever there are two masks on both sides, it could mean, hey, you need to jump instead of ducking. Now, whether or not you have the reaction time and understanding to use that to your advantage in this section, no, you don't. hopefully you are ready, because there's one final QTE.
Hello. デカをなめんなよ。疲れたぜ。一体何時なんだ。今日で退職じゃねえか。最後の山の割には後味が悪いぜ。
But hey, we managed to survive till our retirement. All's well that ends well. The psychotic Evil Eve will no longer be terrorizing Christmas. Or will she? Yeah, in classic horror cliffhanger fashion, they do leave it a bit open-ended about whether or not the terror of Evil Eve has really come to an end. In point of fact, there are actually multiple endings to every chapter. Now, that was pretty much the good ending, but let's say that you managed to fail a whole bunch of times and died and had to continue over and over again because of all these goddamn QTEs. Well, you do manage to finish off Evil Eve in a very similar fashion as before. And to some degree, I do feel a little bit sympathetic towards Eve. It could very well have been that she was just going to grow up to be a normal child, and the father kind of jumped the gun on murdering his family, and, you know, the being burned alive led her into that psychosis. But it's, you know, it's all just a bit of hearsay and guessing. Either way, though, Evil Eve still seems very much dead in this, let's call it, bad ending.
<sighs> 所長のやつ人使いが荒すぎるぜ。最後の最後まで後始末をさせやがって。まあこれで明日は無事定年か。さーて帰るとするか。あ、まずい。かみさんとクリスマスディナーの約束忘れちまった。とにかくうちに電話しなくちゃ。かみさん怒ってるだろうな。もしもし、俺だ。すまん。仕事が長引いちまった。今すぐ 楽しみに待っててくれ。あ、そうだ、メリークリスマス。
Merry Christmas, everybody. But yeah, with Shadeland now overcome, Cat and Mouse is now in the bag, which allows us access to our next story, Ghost Rider Word. Hopefully you'll join me then. I'll see you next time.